Welcome to Biz Wire. I'm Joseph Nordstrom in Beijing. While the American Congress finally came to an agreement on Wednesday night to end the government shutdown and avert a possibly catastrophic default on its debt, commentary in China has been calling for a, quote, de-Americanized world. And without many options for its currency reserves, China owns at least $1.3 trillion of American debt and is understandably nervous about its holdings. A heavily cited editorial was published by the Communist Party's official Xinhua news agency this past weekend, saying China should work towards making the world less centered around America. The tartly worded editorial says, quote, instead of honoring its duties as a responsible leading power, a self-serving Washington has abused its superpower status and introduced even more chaos into the world by shifting financial risks overseas, instigating regional tensions amid territorial disputes, and fighting unwarranted wars under the cover of outright lies, end quote. Bill Bishop of the Cynicism newsletter says that the original Xinhua article was published in English and hasn't received much attention within China. While the editorial isn't a declaration of official opinion, it does reflect some of the thinking going on in China, a country with a growing sense of confidence. For all the bluster and bravado in the Xinhua editorial, there were a few notes of reasonableness. The writer, Liu Cheng, who was only later given credit for the piece, called for giving emerging and developing economies more say in international financial bodies like the World Bank and IMF, and to create a, quote, new international reserve currency that is to be created to replace the dominant U.S. dollar. In a series of steps over the past several years, China has moved to make the yuan, or RMB, a more international currency and to be fully convertible, possibly within a few years. Yesterday on Biz Wire, we reported that in 2010, the yuan was the 17th most traded currency in the world, last year the 9th, and is projected to be 3rd in just 2 years, so it's well on its way, but certainly not there yet. Weighing in on the issue, Nicholas Lardy, a respected expert on the Chinese economy, said China should quit adding to their foreign reserves. Lardy says the recent debacle in Washington is a wake-up call that holding U.S. government securities is not risk-free. But for at least the time being, Beijing has little choice but to keep their reserves in dollar-denominated assets. As the New York Times writes, for all the chaos in Washington, U.S. Treasury bonds remain a safer investment than most of the alternatives. The Times says this dependence may help explain the resentment expressed in the Xinhua piece. Exact figures are considered a secret, but analysts estimate that 60% of China's nearly $3.7 trillion in reserves are still in dollar-denominated debt. Xinhua's editorial ended by saying that the changes it calls for is, quote, not to completely toss the United States aside, but to encourage Washington to play a more constructive role in addressing global affairs, a sentiment I'm sure even Americans could agree with. You're watching Biz Wire on the Blue Ocean Network, China's first and only privately owned broadcast media. All of our stories can be seen on our website, BONTV/biz-wire. In just a second, we'll continue with more insight into the big picture of China's economy.